The day Earth's battleship arrived in the Zenari system, the entire galaxy held its breath. The Galactic Union had always dismissed humanity as a minor species, a backwater race from the Sol system that barely had a seat at the interstellar table. To them, humans were insignificant, useful as mercenaries, laborers, or traders, but not a real power. Certainly not a threat. That changed when the behemoth arrived. The battleship was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not sleek like the elegant warships of the Elvery, nor did it have the organic, flowing architecture of the Zith. No, the behemoth was brutal in design. Sharp edges, thick plating, and weapon mounts bristling across its hull. It radiated power, not grace. And it wasn't alone. Flanking it were two smaller vessels, the Revenant and the Titan's Fist, each one more menacing than any warship the Union had ever encountered. They came in response to the massacre at Proxima Centauri. The Drath Collective, an insectoid race that ruled half the known galaxy, had made a fatal mistake. They had destroyed a human colony, assuming Earth would bow down like so many other races before them. The Drath thought humanity would beg for mercy. Instead, they got the behemoth. The Galactic Union's diplomats scrambled for answers. They sent frantic messages to their allies, urging them to prepare for what was coming. The Drath, however, laughed. To them, humans were nothing but pests, a minor inconvenience. They gathered their fleets, ready to swat away whatever Earth dared to throw at them. And then the behemoth opened fire. The first volley shattered the lead Drath battleship in an instant. Their shields, which had withstood centuries of war against lesser races, crumpled like paper under the sheer force of human weaponry. The Union watched in horror as humanity demonstrated something no one had believed possible: true technological supremacy. Plasma cannons burned through hulls. Kinetic rounds the size of city buses punched through enemy formations like they were made of glass. Railguns, moving projectiles at nearly the speed of light, shredded entire fleets before they could even react. The Drath screamed for reinforcements. They sent hundreds of warships to stop the human onslaught. It didn't matter. Earth had been underestimated for centuries. They had watched the galaxy, studied its technology, and learned its weaknesses. And when the time came, they didn't just catch up. They surpassed every major power in one brutal, terrifying moment. The Galactic Union panicked. If humanity could do this to the Drath, what could they do to the rest of them? Then came the final transmission from the behemoth. A simple message, broadcast to every world in the Union. Earth does not forget. Earth does not forgive. Stay out of our way. And just like that, the galaxy cowered in horror. The wreckage of the Drath fleet still drifted through the void, glowing embers of shattered warships casting eerie shadows against the backdrop of the stars. The battle had lasted less than an hour, but its impact would be felt for centuries. The Galactic Union's High Council, a collection of the most powerful species in the known universe, sat in stunned silence. The footage of the behemoth's assault played on a massive holoscreen in the center of the grand chamber. Not one of them had expected this. Ambassador Jular of the Elvery, a tall, silver-skinned diplomat whose race had dominated the galaxy's politics for millennia, was the first to speak. "We have miscalculated," he admitted, his usual calm replaced by unease. Humanity was not what we believed. The insectoid Kthari delegate, clicking its mandibles nervously, chittered in response. They destroyed an entire battle group. The Drath had nearly 100 warships, and the humans— "3," interrupted Grand Marshal Sorak of the Thalkesh, his feline features tense. "They only needed 3. A hush fell over the council. Humanity had never been taken seriously as a military force. Their fleets were assumed to be outdated, weak, barely capable of holding their own, And yet, here they were, standing atop the ruins of one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. But it wasn't just their victory that terrified the Council. It was the way they fought. Other species had long since abandoned kinetic weaponry in favor of energy-based combat. The humans, however, had perfected both. Their ships fired slugs of hyper-dense metal at relativistic speeds, tearing through shields that should have been impenetrable. They didn't just disable enemy ships. They annihilated them, reducing them to drifting debris in seconds. They did not come for negotiations, the Zith representative murmured, its gelatinous form quivering. They did not ask for reparations. They did not even issue a formal declaration of war. No, Jular agreed grimly. They came for vengeance. At that moment, a new transmission arrived. The Union's high command expected a demand, perhaps a threat. What they received was a cold, precise statement. We will not seek war with the Union. We will not expand beyond our borders. But if any of you so much as touch another human world, we will do to your fleets what we did to the Drath. A moment of heavy silence followed. Then, the feed cut out. The message was clear. The humans weren't claiming territory. They weren't demanding tribute. They weren't seeking allies. They had come to prove a point. And they had done it so thoroughly that every government in the galaxy now whispered one terrifying thought. What if the humans decide they want more? The Drath Collective was finished. Their homeworld, once a fortress planet teeming with their kind, now sat in eerie silence. Not because humanity had destroyed it. No, the behemoth had left Drath Prime untouched. But the message had been received loud and clear. The Drath survivors had surrendered before humanity ever reached their system. Their ruling council had scattered, fleeing to the farthest corners of the galaxy. Their military, once a symbol of conquest and terror, had been reduced to wreckage floating in the void. The few warships they had left refused to engage. Some even defected, offering themselves to other empires just to avoid the wrath of Earth's forces. But the galaxy's fear didn't stem from the destruction of the Drath alone. It was how the humans had done it. Every species had heard the stories, wars lasting decades, fleets clashing in prolonged battles, entire campaigns waged over small stretches of space. But humans had ended an empire in a matter of hours. They hadn't fought a war. They had executed a sentence. And now, the question every ruler, every strategist, every admiral was asking was simple. What else were the humans hiding? The Galactic Union scrambled to understand the extent of Earth's military capabilities. They scoured their intelligence reports, sent spies, bribed traitors, even begged human diplomats for insight. But no answer came. And that was what terrified them the most, because the humans hadn't even mobilized their full fleet. The behemoth and its escorts were just a fraction of Earth's power. The real fleet? No one knew where it was, how many ships it contained, or what weapons it carried. For the first time in history, the galaxy wasn't afraid of an empire trying to conquer it. They were afraid of an empire that had no interest in conquest, an empire that only acted when provoked, but when it did, left nothing behind. The Elvari Confederation, once one of humanity's biggest critics, quietly withdrew their patrols from human borders. The Kthari, who had once enslaved human prisoners of war, suddenly abolished all forced labor programs. And the Zith, who prided themselves on their neutrality, refused to speak on the matter at all. Even the Galactic Union's ruling body, usually so quick to pass sanctions and dictate the course of interstellar politics, did nothing, because deep down, they all knew the truth. If humanity ever decided to truly go to war, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. The silence following humanity's display of power stretched across the stars. No species dared to provoke them, and for the first time in galactic history, a single force had become untouchable. Even the most war-hardened empires, those who had once laughed at the idea of human supremacy, now whispered in hushed voices about the behemoth. But while the galaxy cowered, humanity was not idle. Deep within the Sol system, Earth's true military command convened in a classified orbital station hidden behind Jupiter's shadow. Unlike the panic-ridden councils of the Galactic Union, the men and women seated around the war table were eerily calm. They had expected this outcome. Admiral Jonathan Hayes, the architect of humanity's modern war doctrine, leaned forward. His voice, though level, carried the weight of what had just transpired. "The Union is afraid," he said simply, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room. That was the point. Around him sat the minds responsible for Earth's dominance: generals, strategists, scientists. Not a single one of them was celebrating. There were no toasts, no boasts of victory. Humanity had won a battle, but their true war had only just begun. A woman with sharp features and a data slate in her hand cleared her throat. "The Drath are shattered. Their economy will collapse in a matter of months. Reports indicate that smaller factions are already carving up their remains." Hayes nodded. That was expected. The moment the Drath showed weakness, the vultures of the galaxy would descend upon them. It was how power worked out here. Another officer, a younger man with dark skin and a cybernetic eye, spoke next. "The Union hasn't made a move against us, but we've intercepted transmissions between the Elvery and the Zith. They're running simulations, testing out hypothetical conflicts with Earth." A smirk crossed Hayes's face. "And?" The officer hesitated, then exhaled. "None of their models show them winning." A chuckle rippled through the room, but it wasn't one of amusement. It was the kind of laugh shared between soldiers who knew a terrible truth. Hayes leaned back, interlacing his fingers. "Then we proceed as planned." The woman across from him narrowed her eyes. "You think they'll still test us?" "They always do," he said. "Fear doesn't last forever. Eventually, someone will get brave. They'll think we got lucky against the Drath, that we don't have the numbers to fight a prolonged war, that they can unite against us. And when they do?" Hayes's smirk faded. His voice was cold, certain. "We remind them why the galaxy should be afraid." The room fell silent. There was no bloodlust in their expressions, no cruelty in their words. But there was certainty. The galaxy had made the mistake of underestimating humanity once. They wouldn't get a second chance. The days following the destruction of the Drath fleet sent ripples through the galactic community. Every major empire, every ruling council, and every warlord in the known systems was left with the same thought. What have we done? For centuries, humanity had been treated as little more than an afterthought. A species confined to its small sector of space, scrapping for resources, barely keeping up with the great powers of the universe. They had been useful, sure, hired as mercenaries, traders, explorers, but no one had ever truly feared them. Not until now. And yet, fear alone was not enough to keep the galaxy at bay forever. Admiral Jonathan Hayes knew this better than anyone. Sitting in the command center of Earth's secretive black station, he watched as dozens of intelligence reports scrolled past his screen. The Galactic Union was rattled, but rattled did not mean defeated. It meant they were thinking. It meant they were planning, and eventually, it meant they would act. The war against the Drath had not been a war. It had been an execution. But the next war? The one that Hayes knew was inevitable? That one would be different. "Sir," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Commander Elise Carter stood at attention, her expression grim. "We've detected an increase in fleet movements along our borders." Hayes exhaled slowly. Which factions? The Elvari Confederation and the Zith Dominion are reinforcing their defensive lines. We've also intercepted a Union-wide transmission. Carter tapped on her holopad, and the message appeared before them. A grainy recording of High Chancellor Orlan, one of the most powerful political figures in the galaxy, flickered to life. The reptilian leader's voice was measured but heavy with tension. The events at Proxima Centauri have shown us a terrifying truth. Humanity possesses weapons beyond anything we have prepared for. Their fleet, once dismissed as primitive, is capable of annihilation on an unprecedented scale. We must not allow ourselves to be divided by fear. We must stand together. We must find a way to ensure that such a force is never again unleashed upon the galaxy. Hayes snorted. They're uniting against us. Carter nodded. It's only a matter of time before they attempt something. They're scared, Hayes said, but fear breeds desperation. They won't sit idle forever. They'll try to learn our secrets, infiltrate our systems, maybe even launch a preemptive strike. We're monitoring all possible incursions, Carter assured him. No ships have crossed into our space, yet. Hayes stood, walking over to the massive viewport overlooking Jupiter's stormy expanse. Black Station wasn't visible to the naked eye. It was hidden deep within the planet's radiation belt, undetectable to any known sensor technology. It was the beating heart of humanity's war machine, the place where their most dangerous projects were developed in secrecy. What about our own movements? He asked. Carter hesitated. Fleet Command is holding the behemoth back at Titan Station, awaiting further orders. But... She glanced at him. Sir, with respect, the Union won't stay defensive forever. They're building alliances as we speak. If they come for us, they'll do it together. Hayes turned back to her, his expression unreadable. Then we'll need to make sure they never come for us. Carter frowned. Are you suggesting a first strike? No, Hayes said. Not yet. But we need to show them that fear is the correct response, that there is no winning against us. We don't start wars, Carter. He exhaled. We end them before they begin. Carter didn't respond immediately, but the weight of his words hung between them. The galaxy was on edge, waiting to see if humanity would make another move. And that was exactly where Hayes wanted them. Begin deployment of Ghost Fleet Protocol, he ordered. Let's remind the galaxy that no matter where they hide, no matter how many alliances they forge. He turned back to the viewport, watching Jupiter's storms rage below. Humanity is always watching. The first step of Earth's true war had begun. The stars belonged to humanity now. Not in the way the Galactic Union had once claimed dominion over the galaxy, ruling through treaties and trade agreements. No, humanity's rule was far more terrifying. It was silent, unchallenged, a presence that loomed over every empire, unseen yet undeniable. And Admiral Jonathan Hayes intended to keep it that way. Deep within Black Station, hidden beyond Jupiter's radiation storms, the command center hummed with quiet activity. Officers worked in focused silence, processing intelligence reports, monitoring fleet movements, and ensuring that humanity's watchful eye never blinked. Commander Elise Carter approached Hayes with a grim expression. Sir, the Union has begun mobilizing. Surveillance drones have picked up large-scale fleet exercises near Elvari space. Hayes barely reacted. How many ships? At least 300, she replied. Mostly Elvari, but there are Zith warships among them. They're training together, simulating large-scale engagements. She hesitated before adding, their simulations focus on countering the behemoth. Hayes exhaled slowly. Predictable. It had been inevitable. Fear was a powerful motivator, but it only lasted so long. Eventually, paranoia set in. The Union knew they couldn't allow humanity to exist as an unchecked power. They would try to find weaknesses, develop countermeasures, and, when they believed they were ready, they would strike. They would do exactly what Hayes had predicted. "Any indication they're planning to move on us soon?" he asked. Carter shook her head. "Not yet. Right now they're just preparing. But the fact that the Elvari and Zith are working together, that's unprecedented. It means they're serious." Hayes stared at the galactic map hovering in front of them, red markers highlighting known fleet movements. He could already see the pieces shifting into place. The Union wanted a war. They just didn't realize they had already lost. He turned to Carter. "Activate Ghost Fleet Protocol. I want silent incursions into their systems. No attacks, no engagements, just surveillance. We're going to know everything before they make their move." She nodded. "I'll have the stealth ships deployed immediately." Hayes clasped his hands behind his back. "And bring the behemoth to the Kepler defense line. No direct confrontations, but I want them to see it. Let them know it's waiting for them." Carter smirked. "You want them to hesitate?" "I want them to understand," Hayes corrected. "Before they even think about war, they need to feel the weight of what they're considering." He leaned in, his voice quiet but firm. "Because when we strike, it won't be a war." His eyes, cold as the void, met hers. "It'll be an extinction." Across the galaxy, in the heart of the Elvari Confederation, High Chancellor Orlan sat in his private chamber, watching the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. The footage showed a lone battleship, a human warship, floating along the border of Union space. The behemoth. It hadn't moved. It hadn't fired a shot. But it was there, like a predator watching its prey. Orlan turned to his military advisors. "Tell me," he said carefully, "do we have any weapon capable of matching that ship?" Silence. The gathered officers exchanged nervous glances, none wanting to be the first to speak. Finally, a 10th admiral cleared his throat. "No," he admitted. "We don't." Orlan felt a chill run down his spine. He had hoped for a different answer. Hoped in vain. Because no matter how much they trained, no matter how many ships they built, the truth remained. Humanity was already at war with them. The Union just hadn't realized it yet. The moment the behemoth appeared along the Kepler defense line, the Galactic Union froze. Messages flooded through encrypted channels. High-ranking officials whispered in darkened chambers, and military analysts scrambled to determine what it meant. The battleship had not crossed into Union space. It had not fired a shot. It simply existed. And yet, that alone was enough to bring the galaxy to the brink of panic. In the Elvari High Council, Chancellor Orlan stood before a holographic display, his gaze locked on the massive warship floating in the void. Even from millions of kilometers away, its presence was suffocating. An aide leaned in, voice hushed with barely concealed terror. "Sir, our forces remain on high alert. We've positioned 3 fleets along the sector border, but—" He hesitated. "But what?" Orlan snapped. The aide swallowed hard. "We have no idea what's inside that ship. We don't even know the extent of human technology." That was the problem, wasn't it? Humanity had revealed only what they wanted the galaxy to see. They had unleashed the behemoth against the Drath, yes. But what if that was just a distraction? What if their true weapons, their true warships, were hidden somewhere beyond the reaches of known space, waiting for the right moment to strike? Orlan turned to his military advisors. "Tell me we have something, some countermeasure." A Zith strategist clicked his mandibles. "We've been running combat simulations against the behemoth. Every scenario ends in catastrophic loss." The room fell into silence. Orlan clenched his fists. He had been prepared for war, but not this kind of war. Not one where his people were already outmatched before the first shot was even fired. "We cannot allow ourselves to be paralyzed by fear," he said finally. "The humans have power, yes, but they do not rule us. If they think they can intimidate the Union into submission, they are mistaken." One of the Elvari generals stepped forward. "Do you propose an attack, Chancellor?" Orlan hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? Strike first or wait for the inevitable. Either choice carried its own kind of death sentence. "No," he said at last. "Not yet. But we will prepare." Across the galaxy, preparations for war began. Meanwhile, aboard the Behemoth, Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the distant Union fleets through the viewport. They were gathering like insects, their ships tiny specks in the darkness, bristling with weapons yet afraid to come closer. Good. Commander Elise Carter approached him, datapad in hand. "Union forces are holding position. No aggressive movements." "They're afraid," Hayes said simply. She hesitated. "But fear won't last forever." "No," he admitted. "It won't." That was why Ghost Fleet protocol had already begun. Scattered throughout the Union's territories, unseen by their sensors, humanity's true power was already at work. Advanced stealth ships, cloaked beyond detection, were infiltrating their systems, listening, watching, mapping out every weakness. The moment the Union made their move, they wouldn't be fighting the Behemoth. They wouldn't even be fighting the full force of Earth's fleet. They would be fighting an enemy that already knew their plans, an enemy that had already won. Hayes turned to Carter. "Deploy the next phase. The Union thinks they still have a chance." A slow smile crossed his face. "Let's show them how wrong they are." In the cold depths of space, where light barely reached and silence reigned, Ghost Fleet protocol was in motion. No one in the Galactic Union saw them, no sensors detected their approach, no alarms sounded as humanity's hidden fleet moved like shadows through the void. They were not here to attack. Not yet. They were here to prepare the battlefield before the war even began. Aboard the Union's Central Defense Station, Zeraxis Prime High Chancellor Orlan sat in his war room, surrounded by his top generals and admirals. A massive holographic display flickered before them, outlining known human fleet movements, or at least what they thought were human fleet movements. "The Behemoth remains stationed near Kepler," an Elvari strategist reported. "Additional human warships have been detected at their core systems, but there's no indication of a full mobilization." The Zith Admiral, his mandibles clicking in agitation, interjected. "And that is precisely what concerns me. We have no evidence of a grand fleet, no proof that they have more ships of the Behemoth's caliber. What if—" "They must have more," Orlan interrupted, his voice cold. "No empire places its strongest asset on the front line without reinforcement. The fact that we haven't seen them only means one thing." Silence filled the war room. Finally, an Elvari officer spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're already here." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because it was the only explanation that made sense. Humanity had revealed its battleship, but the true war was being fought in the shadows, deep inside Zith Dominion space. A Union-controlled refueling station floated in the darkness, supplying ships along the major trade routes. Its defenses were standard, enough to deter pirates, but not built to withstand a true assault. It didn't need to be. The Union was at peace. Or at least, that's what they thought. Unseen by every watchful eye, a human stealth ship hung in the void, completely silent. Its hull was coated in experimental materials that absorbed sensor waves, rendering it invisible to scans. It did not approach. It did not attack. It simply listened. Inside the vessel, Lieutenant Marcus Hall watched as streams of intercepted transmissions scrolled across his screen. Messages from Union warships, encrypted orders from military command, fleet deployments, supply routes. They weren't just gathering intelligence. They were rewriting the war before it began. A soft chime echoed through the bridge. The data extraction was complete. Hall turned to his team. "Send the package to Black Station. Let High Command know where to strike." The information surged through encrypted channels, traveling undetected through the vast galactic network. Within hours, Earth's top strategists would know the location of every major fuel depot, supply station, and weak point in the Union's infrastructure. By the time the Union fired its first shot, they would already be bleeding out. Back on the Behemoth, Admiral Hayes stood on the command deck, reading the latest intelligence reports from Ghost Fleet. His officers awaited his orders, but they already knew what was coming. "It's time," Hayes said, his voice calm. "Send the next message to the Union." Commander Carter nodded, transmitting a simple, untraceable signal across all Union channels, a message that needed no explanation. "We are already inside your walls." And with that, humanity's war had already begun. Panic spread like wildfire through the Galactic Union. The message, simple, chilling, had been broadcast across every secure military channel. "We are already inside your walls." No one knew where it came from. No transmission logs, no traceable source. It had simply appeared, as if humanity itself had whispered it into their ears. Chancellor Orlan stood in his private chamber, staring at the words repeating on his holoscreen. His claws twitched in agitation. "What does this mean?" he demanded. A Union intelligence officer, his Elvari skin paler than usual, swallowed hard. "It means, Chancellor, they're already here." Orlan's blood ran cold. "How? How could they have infiltrated us so quickly?" The officer shook his head. "We don't know. There have been no confirmed intrusions, no breaches in our security systems, no sign of human fleets inside our borders." And yet, the message was clear. The humans wanted them to know. Somewhere, somehow, they had slipped past the Union's defenses. They weren't attacking. They weren't negotiating. They were simply waiting. It was psychological warfare at its purest. The worst part? It was working. Aboard the Behemoth, Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the incoming data streams from Ghost Fleet. Their silent incursions had gone undetected. Every major refueling station, supply line, and fleet deployment was now logged in Earth's war database. They knew everything. Commander Carter approached. "Union forces are scrambling. Their fleets are repositioning defensively, but it's chaotic. They don't know where we'll strike." Hayes nodded. "Good." "They're scared," Carter continued. "But fear only buys us time. Eventually they'll take action." Hayes glanced at the galactic map hovering before him. The Union's forces were spread thin. They had no central rallying point. No single command hub that could withstand a full-scale engagement. If war came, they would shatter like glass under a hammer. But that was not the plan. Not yet. "They'll come to us first," Hayes said. "That's the nature of frightened empires. They don't attack immediately. They probe. They test boundaries, send spies, maybe even a small fleet to gauge our response." Carter frowned. "You're suggesting they'll poke the bear?" "They don't think we're a bear, Commander," Hayes said with a small smirk. "They think we're a sleeping giant. They'll try to wound us first, see if we react." Carter's eyes darkened. "And when they do?" Hayes' voice was steel. "We won't react. We'll end them before they understand what's happening." He turned back to the display. "But first, we let them think they have control. Give them space to breathe. Let them believe they're making the right moves." Carter exhaled slowly. "We're playing the long game, then." Hayes nodded. "And when the time comes," his eyes gleamed like a predator waiting for the kill, "we take everything from them." The Galactic Union was unraveling. In the weeks following humanity's message, "We are already inside your walls," the once mighty alliance of empires had begun to fracture. Fear gripped their leaders. Paranoia spread like an infection. No one trusted their own security. No one knew where the humans were hiding, or if they had already infiltrated the highest levels of their governments. The worst part? There was no proof of any actual infiltration. No human agents had been caught. No data breaches had been detected. No sabotage had occurred. And yet they all believed it had. The Sith Dominion purged hundreds of suspected human spies, only to realize too late that they had executed their own intelligence officers. The Elvari Confederation imposed strict security measures, limiting interstellar travel and tightening border controls, suffocating their own economy in the process. The Union was tearing itself apart. And Admiral Jonathan Hayes watched it all unfold from the bridge of the Behemoth. Inside the Elvari High Council chamber, Chancellor Orlan sat at the head of a long, gleaming table. His advisors gathered before him. The room was dimly lit, an unspoken acknowledgement of their desperation. The once proud leaders of the Union now whispered like hunted prey. "We must act," an Elvari general said. "We cannot live under the shadow of humanity forever." "Agreed," growled a Sith admiral, his mandibles twitching. "We strike now before they strike us." "Do we even know where to strike?" an intelligence officer countered. "For all we know, they want us to attack. They could be leading us into a trap." Orlan exhaled sharply. He had ruled over the Union for decades, but never had he felt this powerless. "They have made no official demands," he said. "They have not declared war. They have not expanded their borders. They have done nothing except wait." The silence in the room was suffocating. That was what terrified them the most. If the humans had invaded, the Union could have fought back. If they had made demands, negotiations could have begun. But humanity had done neither. They had simply existed, and the Union was losing because of it. Orlan clenched his fists. "We need to reclaim control of this situation. We will force humanity's hand." The Sith general leaned forward. "You mean provoke them?" "I mean test them," Orlan corrected. "Send a fleet to the Kepler defense line, a show of force, not an attack, just enough to see how the humans respond." "And if they respond with the Behemoth?" someone asked. Orlan's expression was grim. "Then at least we'll know how they intend to play this war." Meanwhile, aboard the Behemoth. "They're coming." Commander Elise Carter placed a datapad on the command table, showing the latest movement of Union forces. A fleet of nearly 200 warships had begun mobilizing toward the Kepler defense line. Admiral Hayes studied the data in silence. "They won't attack," he said finally. "Not yet. This is a test." Carter nodded. "They want to see if we'll back down." A slow smirk crossed Hayes' face. "Then let's teach them what happens when you test humanity." He turned to his officers. "Deploy Project Revenant. Let them see what they should be afraid of." Carter's eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure?" "We haven't revealed it yet." Hayes' voice was calm. "Certain. It's time the Union learned that the Behemoth isn't the worst thing humanity has built." Hours later, at the Kepler defense line, the Union fleet arrived in formation, weapons powered but not armed, an unmistakable show of force. And then they saw it. A new ship, larger than anything the galaxy had ever known, a monstrous abyss-black warship, its hull absorbing light like a void in space. It made the Behemoth look small. No records existed of its creation. No intelligence reports had ever mentioned its existence. It had never been seen before. The Union fleet, despite its numbers, hesitated, and then the ship spoke. "You are standing at the edge of your own destruction." The message rang across all channels, cold and emotionless. The Union fleet, once so confident in their show of force, found themselves staring into the unknown. And for the first time, they understood the truth. Humanity had never needed to fight them, because humanity had already won. The void of space had never felt so suffocating. The Union fleet, once assembled as a proud show of strength, now drifted in eerie silence before the monstrous warship that had appeared before them. No records, no intelligence reports, no prior warnings. This was something new, something the humans had chosen to reveal at this very moment. The ship had no name displayed on its hull, no insignia, no visible energy output. And yet its presence alone was crushing. You are standing at the edge of your own destruction. The voice was synthetic, almost lifeless, yet it carried a weight that pressed into the minds of every Union officer. The message had been received, loud and clear. Aboard the Union command ship Eternal Vigilance, Admiral Veltra of the Elvari Confederation swallowed hard. His fingers hovered over the comm panel, but he hesitated. He had been a soldier for decades, had fought wars against ruthless enemies, yet in this moment, he felt like an insect staring into the jaws of a predator. "Orders, Admiral?" one of his officers asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Veltra's mind raced. What was this thing before them? Another superweapon? A planet killer? The behemoth had already been terrifying, but this was something else entirely. And humanity had never mentioned it. They had kept this hidden. Until now. Veltra cleared his throat, forcing himself to regain composure. "Open a channel." A brief chime confirmed the link. "This is Admiral Veltra of the Galactic Union. Identify yourself." Silence. Then the ship's voice returned, its synthetic tone cold and unfeeling. "Your name is irrelevant. Your rank is meaningless. Your fleet is insufficient." Veltra's blood ran cold. This wasn't negotiation. This wasn't diplomacy. This was a warning. And it wasn't just directed at him. It was meant for everyone in the Union. Veltra's instincts screamed at him to retreat, to take his fleet and run. But he knew the consequences. If he backed down now, the Union would lose all credibility. Humanity had already demonstrated power beyond comprehension, but the moment the Union admitted defeat, they would become nothing more than vassals under Earth's shadow. He had no choice. "Hold position," Veltra ordered. "We are not here for war." Another moment of silence passed. Then the ship's voice returned. "Then you should leave." The command was not shouted. It was not accompanied by the charging of weapons or the movement of attack formations. It was simply stated as a fact, one that carried the weight of an unspoken threat. Veltra clenched his fists. He wanted to respond with defiance, to demand answers, to prove that the Union would not be cowed. But his sensors told a different story. There were no life signs aboard the warship, no heat signatures, no biological readings. This ship was not manned, which meant it was something else entirely, and the implications of that realization shook him to his core. Veltra's officers awaited his orders, tension thick in the air. He could push forward, demand negotiations, perhaps even order a test strike to gauge the ship's defenses. But deep down, he already knew how that would end. He took a slow breath. "We fall back." A ripple of disbelief spread through the command deck, but no one voiced their objections. No one wanted to stay here. The fleet adjusted course. One by one, the ships turned away from the Kepler defense line, retreating without another word. Aboard the nameless human warship, Admiral Jonathan Hayes watched the Union forces disappear from the sensor display. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. "Phase 1 is complete," Commander Elise Carter said. "They took the bait." "They were never going to fight," Hayes said, folding his arms. "But now they know. Now they understand that the behemoth wasn't our greatest weapon. Carter nodded. What do we do next? Hayes turned his gaze back to the viewport, where the stars stretched infinitely before him. Now, he murmured. Now we let them realize that they've already lost. Inside the Union's War Council, Xeraxis Prime. The atmosphere was suffocating. High Chancellor Orlan sat at the head of the chamber, his expression unreadable as the footage from Veltra's fleet played on the central display. The warship had never fired, and yet the Union had retreated. They didn't even fight us, one of the council members whispered. They didn't need to. Orlan exhaled sharply. They're showing us the tip of the blade, making sure we see it before they decide to use it. The Union was at a crossroads. They could attempt diplomacy, but what bargaining power did they have? They could attempt to rally their forces, but how did one prepare for war against an enemy that had already won before the first battle? Orlan clenched his jaw. He would not surrender. He would not allow humanity to dominate the galaxy unchecked. But every instinct in his body told him the same thing. The Union's fate was no longer in their hands. It was in theirs. The Galactic Union had existed for over 1,000 years. It had withstood wars, economic collapses, rebellions, and external threats. It had bent but never broken. Until now. Humanity had done something no empire, no warlord, no species had ever accomplished. They had shattered the Union's will without ever firing a second shot. Across the galaxy, fear took root in every major power. The Elvari, once proud and unshakable, began withdrawing their fleets from contested regions, unwilling to risk provoking humanity further. The Zith Dominion, known for its ruthless expansion, suddenly halted its military campaigns, its warlords unsure whether humanity was watching them from the shadows. Trade routes collapsed. Diplomats scrambled to salvage alliances that were already crumbling. Whispers of surrender spread through high councils, and in the darkest corners of space, some even suggested the unthinkable, that the Union should submit to Earth before it was too late. And then, the final message arrived. It was not sent through official diplomatic channels. It was not delivered by an ambassador or through a subspace relay. It simply appeared on every planetary communication system, every military console, every leader's private terminal. The war was over before it began. You just didn't know it yet. Earth does not seek conquest. We do not need war. But if you ever lift a hand against us again, there will be nothing left of you. The Union's leaders, already crumbling under the weight of their own fear, knew what had to be done. One by one, the great empires of the galaxy quietly rescinded their war plans. Defensive fleets were recalled, skirmishes along human borders ceased, and the once proud Galactic Union, an alliance that had ruled for a millennium, was reduced to nothing more than fractured, obedient states. No treaty was ever signed, no formal surrender was ever issued, but the message was clear. Humanity did not rule the galaxy through force. They ruled through certainty. The certainty that if the Union ever dared to challenge them again, it would be the last mistake they ever made. As he watched the last of the Union's fleets withdraw from contested space, Admiral Jonathan Hayes allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The war had never been about territory. It had never been about conquest. It had been about setting a precedent. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. That era was over. He turned to Commander Elise Carter. It's done. Carter nodded, exhaling. What happens now? Hayes smiled faintly. Now, we watch. And we wait. Because there would always be someone who forgot the lesson humanity had taught the galaxy today. And when they did, Earth would be there to remind them.